Hey guys, I wanted to talk about budget gardening, more specifically building your garden on a budget. So I live with Live Life Outdoors here in South Central Pennsylvania, roughly zone 6A, 6B, and I started with hardly anything for my garden. What you see today is not what my garden was the first season. So let's talk about our beds over here, because this is really where my growing started. These logs right here, I got those from my neighbor. So a couple houses behind me, they had a big maple tree that he'd cut branches off of, or trunks off of, I guess, because these are very thick. But he just had the pile of wood sitting there, and I noticed that it never went anywhere for like 6 months. So like during the winter, it just sat there. He didn't use it for firewood. And I went over one day and I said, "Hey, do you have any plans for that?" He said, "No, I meant to, never got around to it." And I asked if he wanted anything for them. He said, "No, you can just go ahead and take them." So these were my first garden beds. Now, I didn't have them in long rows like this. They were, two or three small ones, and then I had a long one along the fence, which we only recently deconstructed last season, on the other side. So that was a decent amount of growing space for my first time. I've not added any logs. What you see is what I have. The only thing that's missing is I did have some branches from a different neighbor. They were cutting down, just trimming part of their tree. I don't know what kind of tree that was. They were skinnier branches. I used that. And then I also had a pile of wood. It was holding up an old grapevine, I guess, next door. It wasn't usable in the sense of me being able to like drill into it, and that's just how weather worn it was, but I was able to stack it up into a bed, and I might try to find some photos to put up on the screen, but don't quote me on that. And that served its function. So my first bed was over here. I had a little bit of a walkway, but it was pretty much where the greenhouse sits right now. And then I had one that went this way. It was kind of like a 3-part construction, came out this way, went that way, and then I had 2 more beds going that way. That was it. That's material that I sourced for free. Now, my first year, I knew nothing about bulk soil, so that is where I spent the most of my garden budget, was getting bag soil, unfortunately. However, I learned that lesson very quickly the next season, and that's what allowed me to do the garden as you see it now, because I could never have afforded the amount of soil that this takes. I'm trying to decide how I want to come into the garden here. So these beds here, these are red oak, and immediately you're like, it's wood, it's expensive, it's red oak. Oh my gosh, I could never. However, the difference that I got lucky in here is in my local area. I live in a small town. I went up a couple towns up to a local hardware store, and their specialty is not live edge. They they mill and they plane everything. They're selling stuff to make things for their customers to make things. So they had these pieces that had not been planed yet. They are live edge on both sides, and he offered these to me at a discount. So I have 2 roughly. One's about a 50-foot bed, one's about a 40-foot bed, and all the wood for this, aside from the post, we'll talk about that in a minute, the post right there, only cost me $200. That's unheard of for this type of wood. So like, look around. You don't have to break the bank doing these things. Again, my first set of beds were free. I could have stuck with those. I mean, I'm still using them over there. It works just fine. This was just my personal preference, and $200 was affordable for me. So I went ahead and did this. It's all about what works for you, your budget, your lifestyle, and what you want to accomplish. And if you want to upgrade at some point, feel free to do so. And a reminder that you can change things. Did that take a lot of work? Heck yeah. That was a lot of moving dirt from here to over there to back and forth, because we also had to move the dirt out of the way that was already in the beds that I had, right? We had to deconstruct all of those beds. Thankfully, nothing was nailed together, so that helped the process. But you can change things. Now, the only downside was the posts. Those posts were expensive because I forgot to get them while I was there at that location. They may have still been costly, but that hardware store was much cheaper overall in their prices compared to the local lumber store that I have here. So that's something to think about, is checking in, seeing if your local hardware store does that type of thing. Especially during the winter is what they told me. That's when, projects aren't happening, so they're more likely to have wood that's just sitting around in a pile that hasn't been planed yet. So if you are thinking about starting your garden, you can start it damn near for free, and you can do it on a budget. So now that I know that I can get bulk soil, which I get mushroom soil from a local hardware store, actually the same hardware store that I got the lumber from, that saves me a ton of money. So a scoop of soil is $30, and that is about 27 cubic feet, which is roughly about 13 bags of soil. 13 bags of soil would be a lot of money, because one bag of soil at this point, at least where I am, a decent bag of soil is going to be $16 to $20. You've already spent that scoop of soil in one bag, because again, one scoop is only $30, if I didn't say that. And the delivery fee is $30. So second bag of soil, right? $30. I have easily made up for the fact that now I can afford soil, because I can get 13 bags of soil for $60 total. Like, let that math sink in. I don't remember how much that is in the 13 bags, but 13 bags times $20. I don't math well, but it's a lot. And that's usually where people get hung up and they're not able to do their gardens, is because they can't afford the soil. So go find yourself some logs that a neighbor doesn't need. Even if you got to pay like $10 to take them from them, whatever, that's just $10 compared to spending the $200 that I spent on my wood, or an exorbitant amount on wood that's already been milled, because it's extremely expensive. And then the soil, don't get bag soil, look for local soil. So either mushroom soil or compost. And then, your seeds. Your seeds are cheap at that point in comparison, because your seeds, you can buy a packet of seeds for $2, and that's going to give you several plants. And you could even start with just the basics. You could have like a tomato plant. I mean, you can get like 15 tomato plants out of a packet of seeds, depending, but you can start with a tomato plant, a pepper plant, whatever, a bunch of radishes. Just remember that like things like radishes, cabbage, broccoli, unless it's like a sprouting broccoli, those are, one seed is one thing. So one radish seed is one radish. So you're gonna have to plant multiple of those. We'll talk about that in another video. But your seeds are practically nothing in comparison to having to purchase the soil. And if you can get that at a bulk, amazing. So anyways, I feel like I'm rambling at this point in one of my rambling garden videos. But yes, you can do this on a budget, and yes, it can actually create a deficit in your spending at the grocery store. So like during the season, if I'm having a good garden season, which I had the previous 3 years, I was not spending any money getting produce at the grocery store during the summer. And depending on how much you buy or you want to buy, that is easily $60 to $100 a week, if not more, depending on the size of your family. So this is doable, it's accomplishable. Don't let anyone ever tell you it's just a hobby. It can be if you want it to, but it can actually feed your family and it can save you money. Alright guys, that's it. I'm going to stop rambling and I will see you in the next one.